When I was young, probably my first personal hero was Alexander the Great. He was the coolest. And he was a man of an indomitable spirit. He conquered the Persian Empire, the greatest empire in the world at the time. He conquered an island by building a land bridge to it. That was awesome. And scaled an indomitable fortress wall, actually an entire cliff face, to take that fortress, which no one thought could be done. That was amazing. He cut the Gordian knot, conquered most of the world, and was loved or feared from Macedonia all the way to the Indus Valley. And not only this, he was loved by his men. He was not a man who would shirk danger or hardship with them. He marched with them, he ate with them, he led his men from the front among the cavalry. And that was actually how he won that great battle at Galgamea against the Persian Empire, with a brilliant maneuver that broke the Persian line and sent the enemy king flying. Amazing. And he led that charge himself. And I remember, I was unable to confirm this story, but I remember reading a story about how Alexander would ride along the column of his men marching and look for a man who was struggling to carry his pack. And then he'd stop and let that man ride his horse, and then carry that man's pack with him for a mile and talk to his men. And he knew his men, and he was loved by his men because he engaged with them. That made him the coolest to me. And then as I read more about Alexander, I found out more about him. Found out the man was a drinker. In fact, he may have drunk himself to death. And not only did he drink, while he was drunk, he was prone to violent fits of rage, even killing one of his close friends and commanders with a spear after a disagreement. And I didn't know what to do with this. On the one hand, this man was a great personal hero of mine. And on the other hand, he was a petulant child and a drunken monster. Totally different people. And I didn't know what I could do with that, how to make those two images fit. Why am I telling you this? It helps in us learning about our past and the heroes of our past. There's a natural instinct. Why is it that I loved Alexander in the first place as a young boy? It's because I saw in him the things that every young boy should want to become, should want to be a leader, should want to be strong, should want to be brave, should want to care for his people. And then why did I have that problem with Alexander? Because I saw in him the faults of mankind as well. This is ultimately why we look for heroes. We look not at the hero, not at the man, but at the virtues we want to be like, and the vices and the sins that we want to avoid. And I think this is the framework that we need when we're looking at and judging our own history and the great men of our history. I still love Alexander the Great and still very much want to be like him, insofar as he was virtuous. Insofar as he had his vices, I don't want those, but I still honor and love him for those virtues. And when we look to judge the people of our past, sometimes we can fall into an arrogant trap where we'll hold them to a higher standard than we hold ourselves, or sometimes even hold them to a wholly unreasonable standard from their time frame. Who among us can say that if we were born in the 1500s or the 1600s would have been an ardent abolitionist for sure, and against all the scientific knowledge of the time, known the truth that we know today, that race doesn't matter in terms of a man's wisdom and knowledge and value, specifically value, that all mankind is equal in value regardless of skin color. A knowledge that was against even the scientific wisdom of the day, but we now know to be true and hold in our hearts. Who among us would have known then? Instead of trying to hold our ancestors and our great men to ever-shifting standards of morality that we ourselves don't always stand up to, that we can't always be measured up to, we should look at them at the constant, we should look for the never-changing moral structures of virtues and vice. A man born into the 1800s, like Abraham Lincoln himself, likely would not have necessarily known and been sure of the equality of all mankind, but he would have known the virtue of love, and a loving, virtuous man would have shown that love despite the days, despite whatever era he was lived in. If he had that virtue, it would show through in the way he treated everyone. And a man with vices, despite living in this enlightened time, where he knows that all mankind, despite race, are equal, will still treat others horribly if he has the vice of hatred, even if he knows that men are equal. And this is why we continue to honor men from the past, even when we know that they would not measure up to our standards today. Because when we look at them, we can still see the virtues that we want to imitate and to become. And we can see the vices. And no, we don't need to pretend that those vices aren't there. We need to be honest about them. We need to integrate them into our picture of the man. I still love Alexander the Great for the virtues that he possessed that I want to. His courage, his care for the men under his command, and his indomitable spirit and his brilliant mind. All of those are things that I want to imitate of his. And I know I will not imitate his vices of drunkenness and petulant rage, because I can see what those did, and I know not, and I swear I will not follow those vices. This is why I think the Garden of Heroes proposed for our nation is a moral good for our society. We will look at the men of our history, the men who built the great civilization we live in today, and see them for the virtues that we need to measure up to, that we need to imitate. We can see George Washington for the paternal love and care he took for everyone under him, and his trials and work to build this great nation, and his love of freedom. And any vices and sins that he may have had, we will remember those as well. But that does not detract from the honor of the great man's virtues. That's why I still love Alexander.